Welcome to the roller coaster ride formerly known as Pecco Bagnaia's Catalan weekend. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 420 of Motorsport 101 plus one, of course. On this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about MotoGP's Grand Prix of Catalunya, the real second half of what was a pretty goddamn incredibly hectic weekend of motorsport. We already talked about Monaco and the Indy 500 in our last half of the episode. Then that was a lot to dissect. And mostly the IndyCar race. Monaco, not so much. I'm not going to make another joke about the blog, but here we are. In part two of our...
You've tried to dissect it and you've gone immediately to the table with the knife.
I did, to be fair. I was in the middle of dissecting it with a knife, but then I fell asleep, so I had to find the nearest pillow. So, you know, it couldn't quite work out in that sense. But
Are you just making another allegory about the American healthcare system?
Not intentionally. if we got there by
time for those.
If we get there by accident, then fair enough. I can't really complain. Like, you know, if it kills two birds with one stone, I'm all for it personally. But as you can probably already guess who the co-hosts are in this one, but welcome back and happy belated birthday to Mr. Cameron Buckley. Hello, sir.
Otanjibi omedetou gozaimasu.
Thank you, everyone. You know, my last few days as 26 were spent wasting hours of time watching a Monaco Grand Prix that no one should rewatch, no one should consider. In fact, me not being on the Indy 500 episode was half of me cashing in on my birthday day off, and half of it cashing in on I do not want to be anywhere near a Monaco discussion.
Oh, so that's why you escaped at the last minute. You sneaky bastard. I wasn't happy about that. I wasn't happy about that.
I was just taking his paid time off. You know, getting vacation time with all the salary that we're getting off of this.
And our multi-billion-dollar podcast enterprise.
God, I wish that was awesome.
Do I look like Bill Simmons to you? Don't answer that.
And watching a pretty damn good Indy 500, and watching a not insane, not another 9 out of 10, but still a pretty solid weekend of motorcycle racing all around.
It's kind of wild that the Grand Prix probably didn't go above the level of good, but the sprint was insanity.
A complete nonsense. Utter malarkey.
That's malarkey. Malarkey, baloney. This is a brouhaha. This is an intense fracas.
ASA 9, ASA 10, ASA 11, ASA 20.
Oh, yeah. All of that
that's
shit.
That's just Pecco Bagnaia's sprint.
Oh yeah, pretty much. That was wild. And speaking of wild, RJ O'Connell is alongside me as well. How's it going, RJ?
I'm not recklessly wild all the time. Just like, I don't know, 60 to 75% of it.
Okay, so we're rounding down. I see.
and as my final birthday present on the day, I mean, Polyphony Digital blessed me with a Castrol Mugen NSX, a Honda I can actually enjoy.
The blessings of us all, the 90s to 2000s golden generation of GT500 cars is back in GT7. This is not a paid advertisement. I am just genuinely happy as a fan of Super GT and as a fan who came into the series through Gran Turismo that this generation is now fully reunited with the Castrol Mugen NSX, joining the Pennzoil Nismo GTR and the Castrol Tom Supra.
I was going to say, is that everybody now from that championship now in GT7? Is that the
big
full...
Three. The big three. They don't quite match up on year, but having spent the entire morning driving them, the NSX and the GTR match up quite well, and the Supra is pretty close, which makes sense given the spacing on the years. But hey, you know, I don't think that's going to be the last time we mention Honda on this podcast, and not for good reasons.
Oh,
it's a MotoGP podcast in 2024. What else is new round here?
The end of a sponsorship partnership that I literally don't know a world without.
Yeah, it's funny. I was putting the set list together and I made a couple of last-minute news decisions, and I actually forgot to include the fact that, yes, the big breaking news story of yesterday, that Repsol and Honda, I should say, are parting ways at the end of this calendar year. The end of an era. It's been Repsol Honda as long as we can remember, but no more at the end of this year, according to our friends at Autosport and the Motorsport Network. So yeah, we'll talk about that in the news at the end of the pod, but we got to get through a loaded sprint, a back and forth Grand Prix as Francesco Bagnaia went from zero to hero. Marc Marquez with two more hellacious comebacks on the weekend because the man cannot help himself. He cannot get a podium via conventional means. He has to do it the old-fashioned way, which is coming back from the middle of the grid.
Minus aerodynamics.
Yeah, minus aero as well, just because he wanted a higher degree of difficulty. It was from the back.
Raise my rent
next week.
Raise my rent. That's how much I believe in the grind.
Yeah, no kidding. And also, we'll be talking about the, I guess, not so sudden and shock retirement, but still a retirement announcement nonetheless for one Aleix Espargaro, who announced that this season will be his last in Grand Prix motorcycle racing. We'll talk a little bit about his career in the middle of the show as well. But in the meantime, let's talk about where you can find us. We're on youtube.com/Motorsport 101 if you want to listen to all your podcasts on there instead of our usual platforms of SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's on Google for the next 2 weeks or so before it finally dies off. So yeah, you can check that out if you're that way inclined. You can head over as well to our website, motorsport101.com, to listen to that and read some blogs all about the last week in motorsport or so. Again, whether it be Formula One at Monaco, it was a very thorough review, MotoGP at Catalonia, and of course the Indy 500 as well. All our reviews on there as ever, full of rich and plentiful content. If you really like us as well, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/Motorsport 101. $5 gets you early access to all of our content. You can upgrade to the $10 tier to get into our supporters club and our Discord server and listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Jason is doing so right now. Thank you, Jason. Also, we've got a brand new Patreon backer. Shout out to Akeem Bristol, who's backed us at the $5 level. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much. If you want to support on our Discord server, please reach out to me. We'll hook you up. But thank you so much, Akeem. Much appreciated. I've seen you liking our stuff for a long time. Thank you for I don't want to say finally, because I don't ever want to tell people it's an obligation to back us on here. I want you to be able to do it if you can. So thank you for being a long-time fan and also now a first-time backer. That's wonderful. Thank you so much from all of us here for being able to do that. That's wonderful. And of course, you can also follow us on our personal social medias if you are that way inclined. On Elon Musk's failed business investment, we are at Motorsport_101. Our personal handles are at Dre Harrison 101, at RJ O'Connell, and at C Buckley 917. Of course, you can follow us on Instagram as well at Motorsport 101 Pod. You can follow us on there to get up to date on all our content as well. But without further ado, let's get into MotoGP's Catalan Grand Prix.
It was a thinking man's ride for Ducati's Pecco Bagnaia in Catalunya in this weekend's Catalan Grand Prix. Not the Italian Grand Prix in Mugello. I remember that this is the Catalan Grand Prix in Catalunya. Despite being only third at the start of the race, an early crash for super rookie Pedro Acosta cleared the way for Bagnaia to save his rear tire and pick off Jorge Martin, who led early to eventually beat him for the win, far away from third place Marc Marquez, 9 seconds back. Cam, it's your birthday, and you weren't with us last time. What were your thoughts on the race?
It was a lot more kind of what we would expect coming into this season, I think, this race, where you didn't have a whole lot of on-track action, and it was your typical Bagnaia just grind out a win via sheer speed over Martin, over the rest of the field. The front two was very conventional. Everything behind that. Why does Mark keep doing this to himself? Is he enjoying the grind?
I don't know. I mean, it's He clearly likes playing his video games with the slider at 120%. I don't know why you do that to yourself personally, but
He's playing Wolfenstein 2 on Mein Leben.
Oh yeah, I don't know why you do that to yourself, but he feels like doing it anyway. I mean, to be fair, by the time Mark got to the front of that group, he was 9 seconds off the front too. I mean, Bagnaia.
That was all he was going to get.
Yeah, Martin and Bagnaia were in their own league in this race this time around, and it was almost like the stereotypes we associate with these two riders came to pass in this one. Jorge Martin got the early hole shot, got to the front, withheld the early storm, tried to break the pack and pull away, because that's what Martin does. He tries to win races via sheer breakneck speed, and he nearly did it this time again as well, but Bagnaia stayed in relatively close range, was able to look after his rear tyre better than Martin could, and with he chipped away at that gap, and then with 6 to go, he pulled the pin, got past Martin, took control, and Martin didn't have a counter. I mean, it sounds boring, but it was a lot more interesting in real time, especially because Pedro Acosta was in the mix as well. Pedro was in second and basically stalking Martin as best as he could. Race pace looks really good until he tucked the front again at turn 10 and binned it. I'm just like, it's back-to-back crashes for Acosta from a high position. It looks like some of that rookie gloss has worn off just a little bit, and this is like
Dre,
a real learning.
It's as John Boyce once said, being a rookie is really difficult.
If nothing else, the kid is still box office, because even when he's losing it, he's still losing it from very, very healthy positions relative to, well, every other KTM.
For a split second, I thought this might be the shot where Acosta goes for the win. His practice runs were really, really good. He was comfortably the quickest and most comfortable looking KTM. I don't want to be full Marco Simoncelli and say that Acosta needs to dial it down one notch yet. It's still so early in his career, and
I think I think we're a little bit early for that. I think it kind of proves the excellence of those around them, where you can see Martin and Pecco and Mark just reel off these incredible laps, and they can just do it just as a race pace, metronomically. Versus Acosta's really having to wring that thing's neck to do it. And finding that right level of risk assessment is just something that's going to come with time for him.
It took Marc Marquez years to learn that kind of thing. He had such a ridiculous amount of raw speed. He was, for every...
It didn't matter for a couple of years because he was just outrunning everybody.
Exactly. When it got close, when the field got more competitive, that's when it mattered more, when he did tuck the front and crash, which did happen with Mark for many, many years. He wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we all know when he was on song, you couldn't touch him for raw speed. It was that simple. And yeah, Acosta will get there. I mean, this is nowhere near panic stations. I mean, I've already seen more than enough of what this guy can do on a KTM compared to, shall we say, his teammate Augusto Fernandez, Jack Miller, who is in the mix for silly season and not in the best of ways either, and so Brad Binder.
If this is a panic, what's everyone else on KTM dealing with right now? Because it's him, and then it's Binder, and then they might as well not have 2 other bikes in the field most weekends.
But not inaccurate.
Cam, is it safe to say that Pecco Bagnaia had amnesia for a minute because he forgot he was him?
Well, yes. The problem is that despite one of his best Sundays in a while, he left here with no benefit in points because he blew the sprint.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk a little bit about that sprint now. I mean, I'll sum it up in a sentence. 3 dudes crashed during this sprint from the lead of the race. It's
the turn 5 of poor judgment.
In real time, it was batshit insane. Like, we had 3 dudes crash from the lead of the race, and one of them was Francesco Bagnaia on the final lap of the sprint when he had a comfortable 1 second lead over Aleix Espargaro in second. And
say the line, Dre.
Death, taxes, Ducati tucks the front at turn 5. Thank you very much. I'm here all week. Try the veal. But yes, it was another Bagnaia front tuck-in experience. And turn 5 is a nasty corner at the best of times on the MotoGP calendar. Downhill, camber, but it dips right towards the entry point of the corner. It's very easy to overload the front tire and tuck it. And that's what he did. It's what Brad Binder did. And in a surprise name, Raul Fernandez was leading this sprint. Yes, we had a Trackhouse leading a sprint race briefly.
The first Raul Fernandez sighting in a hot minute, man.
He's been in the top flight for, 2 and a bit years now. I say this before about Raul. That 2021 Moto2 season was one of the best Moto2 seasons of all time. He won 7 races that season. He broke Marc Marquez's rookie wins record. Was unlucky not to win the championship if it wasn't for his teammate Remy Gardner, who was just a little bit more consistent than him across the season. But
also, right next to him, one of the best, 2 of the best Moto2 seasons in the modern age, right next to one another.
As a team, they won the team's title for Moto2 in September at Aragon with half a dozen races to go. They completely obliterated the Moto2 field. It was remember 2014, Cam, when it was Kallio and Rabat and Maverick Vinales was the only man in the same postcode? That's kind of what it felt like.
Yeah, those two were just giving the field the business. Yeah, and yet, those two looked like born MotoGP killers coming up into the top class, and it was a nightmare for. Gardner's already come and gone completely.
Gardner's in World Superbikes now. He's occasionally on the podium in World Superbikes, but is not. He's an upper midfielder in Worlds, and Raul Fernandez. We've been waiting for this high ceiling upside we saw from him in Moto2, waiting for it to come alive, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I know this is a favourable track for Aprilia in general because of the low grip and Aprilia tends to go well in dirty, slippery kind of tracks. Raul Fernandez blocked past the shit out of Pedro Acosta, took the lead of the race for a lap and a half, and was pulling away from the field by, I think he was 0.8 of a second in front. His wasn't at turn 5, his was at turn 10.
He said it himself, he just blew it. He made a mistake through 9, tried to make up for it in 10, and he went flying off the road. It wasn't even close.
Rush of blood to the head. It had to. It had to have been. Full blown aneurysm. Let's put it to you this way. This is a visual medium. This is not a visual medium, so you're gonna have to forgive me on this one. Pretend turn 10 is is right where an apex is. Raul Fernandez, you have to visually recognize it. He was 100 feet from where his bike was supposed to be by the time he stopped moving. He wasn't even close on brakes. Yeah,
he just completely missed the turn, which is, I hope we see more out of Raul, because he's gotten a raw deal for much of his time here, and now that he is at Trackhouse, I hope that he can just start racking up some solid results.
Trackhouse, he was better in the Grand Prix. He was P6 in the Grand Prix, which is the best Trackhouse finish of the year so far. So good for him. Very solid Grand Prix. That's a lot better for where Raul Fernandez should be. Almost a career high from him. I hope to see it, because like I said, the guy's such an incredible raw talent. I just like to see more. I think he still could be the lead rider for this Trackhouse team. It just hasn't quite come together yet in the end. And it's a shame because, again, incredible speed, but just wrong, just rush of blood to the head, and apparently he bawled his eyes out in the garage afterwards. He knew he made a hellacious mistake on what I think could have been a winning bike, at least for the sprint. He was the fastest man during his lap and a half or so, leading by miles, and just wasn't to be. Binder crashed from turn 5 from the lead as well, and then Bagnaia did in the final lap, which kind of segues us in nicely, because Aleix Espargaro was the person who won that sprint. He set the fastest ever lap of the track in qualifying to do so from pole position. He was a second behind Bagnaia when Bagnaia took the front and crashed. And the big winner was Aleix Espargaro, who would go on to claim the sprint home podium. Not a dry eye in the house in the Aprilia garage. He was hugging everyone that was within range of him at the time he got to the sprint
podium. A lot
podium.
of shit for someone in hugging distance.
Oh yeah. like hugs for everybody. My man was giving out more hugs than Bailey. It was a time to be alive, let me tell you. But we got to circle back a little bit to Thursday, because Thursday was when he called for an exceptional press conference, I think that's the technical term for it. And normally when they're given out, it's normally only for one reason, and that's a imminent retirement announcement. And Aleix apparently made the final decision that morning with breakfast with his family to say, I'm hanging that up at the end of the year. We kind of knew last year that Aleix was already contemplating it, but we got the final confirmation on Thursday that Aleix was hanging the gloves up. A very emotional press conference. He was in tears by the end of it. His whole family was. Jorge Martin was in bits, bless his heart. He could barely keep it together. They are very, very, like, their families are all very, very close friends. I know Aleix cited Martin as a big inspiration for him, as just being a good friend. He's been very open in talking about his mental health and the loneliness that sometimes comes with being on the road, especially during those flyaways at the back end of the year when you go in 2, 3, 4 weeks without seeing your family. And it was a very emotional, very humbling press conference from him. But yeah, I mean, gents, what did he make of the announcement and his career in general? Because it's been quite the story for Aleix over the last 2 decades.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Like when I first started to get back into MotoGP racing, there was the claiming rules teams, basically not quite LMP2 equivalent to all the factory bikes, but
more like picking parts out of the trash that the works teams were throwing out.
Yeah, and Aleix was the guy out of that subclass of MotoGP who was the one guy that could regularly give it to the least effective factory teams, parentheses, Ducati, at that time.
At the time, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and then he finally gets a factory opportunity at Suzuki. It doesn't go quite the way everything it should have gone. He goes to Aprilia then under bad circumstances. It takes a while for them to really find their form, but beginning in 2022, things really start to take off for him. Aleix had a career year in what should be any rider's career sunset, finally gets that first win, starts competing for wins and championships on a regular basis. And hey, the sprint win coming on the weekend that he announces his retirement, I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a sign that, like, hey, if I'm going out on top of my game. This guy's been racing since the very end of 2004 in Grand Prix motorcycle racing. So he's been around for over 20 years at this stage. He's the last active rider who rode an 800cc bike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the last ones as well on a
326 races.
Or a 252 stroke.
Yeah, he's for the if he stays healthy for the whole season, Aleix Espargaro will retire third on the all-time MotoGP appearances list. The only two with more, Andrea Dovizioso and Valentino Rossi.
Good company.
Good company. Only the 9th member of what I call the 300 Club. There's not very many members. So, I mean, Cam, do you want to add anything before I start talking for a sec? Or
Yeah, I mean, if you were to sum up Aleix Espargaro in a single word, I think he is the textbook definition of perseverance. Because he has been at this game a long, long time. Actually, was in MotoGP, actually lost his ride with Premac, went back to Moto2, and then came back up to MotoGP, again, in that claiming rules team era. And he had to spend many a race, many a year in the mid to lower teens, just getting whatever result was on the table for those, again, literally part spin bikes. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when he joined Suzuki upon their return to MotoGP, he was upstaged by this kid named Maverick Vinales, who looked like
the phenom.
it was hotter than fish grease on that bike, getting results out of the Suzuki that, frankly, it did not deserve.
First win back as well, Miss Silverstone.
First win back, and in phenomenal fashion. And overall, I mean, if you look at him going to Aprilia in 2017, that felt like a destination to go out sad by all measurements with Aprilia in 17. And it took them a few years, but with him generally leading bike development for them, they got a little better, and they got a little better. And suddenly, middle of 21, this is starting to come together. And in 22, were it not for that team really just not being ready for the big stage, even if the bike at times was, there is a timeline out there where he wins that championship.
I believe he was only 20 points back going into the Japanese Grand Prix at Motegi when that electrical fault on the grid on the formation lap
ended it overnight.
He was even closer than that. It was 17 points. 17. Quartaro on 211, Bagnaia on 201, Espargaro on 194.
Yeah. I mean, he got 4 consecutive podiums that year on a total of 6 podiums, one of them being Aprilia's first win in the top class.
Argentina.
Since their return.
That was his 200th Grand Prix start. I think it was one of the longest streaks ever before someone had gotten their first win in Grand Prix motorcycle race, and that was start number 200 of his career when he got that first win.
You usually get them sooner than that, or you don't get them at all. And just the amount of work and the amount of dedication to his craft that Aleix has shown for the better part of 2 decades. The fact that he's peaked in the last couple years is it's very unconventional, but it's very cool to watch.
This was never supposed to happen. I remember I did a video about Aleix Espargaro, one of the last ones I did for Motorsport 101, back in 2022 when he won that first race in Argentina, that 200th start I mentioned. The first line I say before the intro even rolls is, Aleix Espargaro was never meant to win a MotoGP race. And I stand by that, because as you guys have described, his career was a grindy one. It was one of...
It was your stereotypical journeyman Grand Prix career, whether on 2 or 4 wheels.
He was the big winner of the open class era, and I use winner in inverted commas because it was a tough time to be a biking fan at that point. It was the haves and the have-nots. Aleix was clearly the best of the open class runners, but that didn't really mean much because the bikes were so off the pace compared to the factory riders. This was still a time in the sport where only 4 bikes could win on any given day, and they were either painted blue or orange. There was no getting around it at that point. That was in the middle of Ducati's 5.5-year winless streak. That was a thing. I know it sounds weird to say now, but that did happen. Aleix Espargaro is, I say this with full sincerity, one of the most sincere and honest bike riders I've ever seen. And that's rare in this world, because a lot of bike racing talk is manufactured PR speak. Aleix always had his heart on his sleeve. He was always brutally honest, sometimes to his own detriment. He left himself open for a lot of criticism in his career. And I remember he and Jorge Lorenzo once had beef, and Lorenzo took the easiest shot you could imagine, the lowest of dangling fruit. You've been here for 10 years and you ain't won a top flight race yet, and I've got 3 championships. It was easy. It was like shooting fish in a barrel for Lorenzo. The fact that Espargaro would come through a factory run where he was beaten badly by Maverick Vinales, who would go on to a factory Yamaha, a top-end MotoGP seat, and deservedly so at the time. Most guys only get 1 run in that kind of seat before Aleix. Aleix, as Cam said, Aprilia was normally the exit door for a lot of riders. They'd already ran through good name riders with good reputations. Alvaro Bautista, who'd go on to dominate World Superbike. Stefan Bradl, who's a world champion in his own right.
Never forget the legendary Scott Redding quote, "You can only polish a turd so much."
It's the
Never
best
forget
thing
that Joe Roberts wanted to stay in Moto2 instead of getting promoted up to the top class with Aprilia.
Yeah, that was
funny how that works out.
we might have come full circle on that by the time we get to next year. But yeah, that's the point. Aprilia was a place you didn't want to ride for. But Aleix stuck it out, used his expertise, used his experience, got in the trenches of Aprilia as they were starting to find themselves. And by the time we got to 2021, he was genuinely competitive. And by 2022, he was genuinely like... Aleix back in 2021 said he was one of the 3 or 4 best riders in the world. Everybody laughed him out of the room, and then he finished 4th in the championship in 2022.
He outclassed the man who outclassed him 6 or 7 years ago in Maverick Vinales.
How awe-inspiring it is to see someone back themselves when they're up against the wall like that and then actually do it. It's awe-inspiring.
It's so cool.
And no one gave Espargaro a prayer of being able to do something like that, and he found a way to do it. And he did it with a factory that was loyal to him, and he returned the favor in kind. And that was awesome to see. And he's had a great career. He's had his fair share of blunders. We'll never forget the 2022 Catalan Grand Prix where he miscounted the number of laps at the end of the race. And
that should have been another win.
It should have been at least a second place. And I begged to my man Lewis at the time, he better not lose that title by 6. Because I swear to God, I had a heart attack watching that race in real time. So he's had his fair share of goofs and gaffes, and he's always going to get cooked a little bit here and there for not having the most spectacular or glittering resume. But he's an important part of... for me, he's the face of what this sport has become in the last 20 years. Like even 15 years ago, this sport was on the brink of financial collapse. I remember the dark ages of 2010, 2011, when there was a 17-bike grid, 3 manufacturers. Kawasaki had pulled Dorna's pants down to go to World Bikes, and Suzuki had 1 foot out of the exit door, and Ducati wasn't competitive. It was a dark period to be a Grand Prix motorcycle racer. The sport has evolved so much since then. And it's gone from a sport that was surviving to a sport that's thriving. And I don't think anyone has exemplified that more than Aleix Espargaro in the last 10 years of his career. And I fully say it. I mean, his Gladiator quote last year was almost our quote of the year last year on the Motorsport 101 Awards. We've grown to appreciate and respect Aleix, not just on the track, but also off it, as a veteran leader, as someone who was never afraid to speak his mind, cared deeply about the safety of his fellow competitor, saw his brother in a hospital wing in Portimao last year, an incident where he nearly died. And he's always been afraid. He's never been afraid to put himself amongst it for the greater good of the sport. And I always admire people like that. I in a sport where it's very easy to stay in line and buck the trend, and just play the game, Aleix was never afraid to do it his way, and I deeply respect him for that.
We're going to be poorer off without that presence.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. A good rider, an even better man, one of the honest, good-hearted people of the paddock. I know his family is going to appreciate it that much more. He's going to be at home a little bit more often, back home in Andorra. He's got a beautiful family. You see him in the garage almost every weekend where they're not on a big flyaway. And the fact that the whole grid came out to appreciate him on that retirement speech says to me a lot about how the sport has changed and how their fellow rider looks at someone like Aleix Espargaro. And it was a beautiful, beautiful scene. He was crying, but Martin was crying more than he was, which I thought was low-key kind of hilarious in the end. Like I said, Martin was in bits. You could barely keep it together. It was beautiful. But happy trails to El Capitano, Aleix Espargaro. And yeah, the paddock will certainly be a lot less vibrant without him. Now, we talked a little bit about Marc Marquez. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, because I do want to address some of the bigger news stories as well. Repsol Honda is no more, as we know it. Repsol is allegedly, according to Autosport from Muriel Puigdemont, one of the best on the paddock in terms of journalists. He's gone for it and reported the story that Repsol are to cut ties with Honda as the title supplier of that team for 2025 going forward from next season. And Cam, I want to say this is, something like a 28-year partnership, something like that. I think it's late 90s they first got together.
1995 was the first Grand Prix
mid-90s.
Honda to wear Repsol colors.
30
back when it was kind of a deep turquoise back then. I quite literally don't know a world where Repsol and Honda aren't together at the peak of motorcycle racing. I mean, if you know me, my bucket list bike is the 2007 Nicky Hayden replica Fireblade that they built for his championship in the Repsol colors. What the hell? How has it gotten this bad?
It's an iconic partnership. It's an iconic part of the grid's culture and color and vibe. You see Honda, you see the black, the deep turquoise that everyone debated at home, and the orange of what made that team what it is. And I know the actual has it. RJ showing it off on our other side right now.
Leave me alone.
That's a cock tease if ever I've seen one right there. But no, it's sad. It makes me sad because I've always had a soft spot for Honda, and I've always had a soft spot for that Repsol partnership, and it's such an iconic part of the grid. The jagged number 4 of Andrea Dovizioso or the 69 of Nicky Hayden.
Nice.
The memories are lodged in my head, and like as Cam, I'm a bit older than Cam. I'm 4 years and change older than him, and I'm in the exact same camp as him. I don't know a Honda factory team without Repsol Honda in all my years of being a bike fan. But times change. Like, that Honda team lost Red Bull when Marc Marquez moved on to Gresini. They lost him as a team and personal sponsor. Honda are at the back of the grid. They're not getting very much TV time at the moment. We saw
no Hondas finished within 30 seconds of the win this weekend.
Yuck. They're just bad. It's hellaciously bad at Honda right now, and there's no sign they're getting any better. Johan Mir literally came out this weekend and said, "I don't know how much longer my body can take this." He's 26, saying this in his prime, and he sounds like a man who cannot wait to get out of there. Like, I spoke to Oriol Puigdemont about this, and he said to me straight up, Dre, Mir would rather leave MotoGP than stay with this bad package.
I mean, in the history of this brand, because Honda came into this world as a motorcycle company.
They were a motorcycle company before they were a car company.
Oh, long before. And initially it was motorized bicycles, and then it was racing bikes. They've never been this bad for this long, not even close.
And if Mir goes, after Marquez goes, who the hell else is Honda going to find that's going to pull them out of this?
I don't think there's a rider that's good. The talent on the bikes are not going to pull them out of this. I mean, they've reduced Luca Marini to looking like a scrub.
The slowest man in the sport right now is Luca Marini. They're trying hard to get Maverick Vinales to possibly move on from Aprilia to go over there.
Check that big.
And Maverick has said, I think he said something along the lines of, I cannot maximize my potential on that bike. He didn't want to commit to Aprilia long term. His boss Massimo Rivola was like, "We've got Maverick for next year," and Maverick was like, "No. I've got doors open." He's got offers on the table. He's considering offers, but he's not confirmed anything. He was asked about Honda, and he said, "Oh, it's not going to be for the money. My family is secure." He's got a little girl at home, Maverick, and he says his family's future is secure, so I want to go somewhere where I can win, basically. And look, I think if you're Maverick, I think staying put is the no-brainer option here, Aprilia, if the option is there. It's clear Massimo Rivola wants to keep him because he wouldn't jump the gun on a possible announcement otherwise, because he clearly believes he's already got Maverick for next year. So it just makes me sad. I mean, we've talked about Honda at length on this show numerous times already. It just makes me miserable seeing the four of them at the back fighting for scraps every week, and they might get a point if there's a high rate of attrition or two in there, right. But they're nowhere.
This was written on May 20th on motorsport.com.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to know Luca Marini's average gap to a Grand Prix winner this year?
Go on. It's probably over 30 seconds.
Try 40.
That's half a lap.
40.009 seconds. This is before the Catalan Grand Prix. It's bad. It's inconceivably bad.
Luca Marini
was like this would happen. I was worried something like this would happen when Marini basically became the only option that was willing to sign for them. I didn't think it'd be this bad.
And Honda got lucky to get a rider of Luca Marini's quality at the 11th hour in the first place. Luca Marini was top 8 in the championship last year.
His average last
was top 5.
His average gap last year was 18.457 seconds before the Catalan Grand Prix. And that's not amazing, but it's twice as far off.
It's startling. It is depressing. Like, I want Honda to do well. It's not through lack of trying. I can clearly see they're making an effort. They're trying everything they can upgrade wise, but this team is miserable. Nothing is working. They're going backwards constantly to try and figure this out, but it's just none of this is working, and it makes me very sad that none of this is working. And yeah, now they've lost their iconic title sponsor.
Would you ever believe, even last year when it was just, you can't think it can get any worse, would you have imagined that Repsol would bail a year later, gone from the partnership?
Honda's not always been brilliant in MotoGP. They've had their bad times. Remember, they very nearly quit this sport themselves in the financial crisis of 2008.
Yeah, they had the second best bike then.
Yeah, and they were still thinking about quitting. So I know times have been rough at Honda, but never like this. Not in the modern era of MotoGP. Not to the point where Repsol don't. No,
they weren't this bad when they were trying to drag a 4-stroke to fight with 2 strokes. In the late 70s, early 80s. They weren't even this bad then.
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And their most iconic rider is flourishing on a GP23 as we speak, because Marc Marquez, not the best start to a weekend, was rough on Friday again. Got knocked out on Saturday morning in Q1. Didn't make the fastest 12 again for the second weekend in a row. Didn't really matter in race, especially the sprint. The sprint, he had his front fairing knocked off by Jack Miller by accident on the opening lap, and he still finished the sprint in second place. And then Grand Prix goes again, picks off the field one by one, eventually finishes third. One of the few dudes who had a soft rear tire, was the only one who really made it work on anywhere near a competitive level. Got into a bit of a fight with Aleix Espargaro at the end, won that fight, finished in third. For those keeping score at home, the last 2 sprints and the last 2 Grand Prix, Marc Marquez has gained 45 places on where he started on the grid and converted 13th, 13th, 14th, 14th into second, and third. He's still only 2 points behind Francesco Bagnaia at the moment, and third in the championship now, a clear third place, having pulled away from Bastianini. Cam, what do you make of Marc at the moment? Because it's looking like great. They've got some speed, but maybe it's a qualifying problem here.
Well, it ain't the race pace. The race pace is fucking unbelievable.
It's great.
It's amazing. Yeah, like it's not just the fact that it's the race pace, it's the fact that he's been able to pass, in this era of a lack of passing with MotoGP bikes. He's been able to do so, despite missing a chunk of aero off the front of his bike in the sprint. But if he wants to be fighting for the title, and he is in range, he is very in range right now, you got to get the qualifying up to par, because if he's just qualifying at par and he's got that kind of race pace, he's throwing hands with the front two.
Yeah. I think his pace is good enough now, or I can say confidently the win will come. It's going to be a matter of just getting the right qualifying position down and not having to work so hard for it. Because the pace is there, the speed is there. Even when Marc says it isn't, he's finding ways of getting this done because of just sheer raw talent and ability. And you got to remember, as Frankie Carchecki quite rightly pointed out on social media over this weekend, Ducati are working with a blank slate with Marc Marquez in this camp. He's got no data. They've got nothing to compare it with from last year when it was Fabio Di Giannantonio in that position. Marc's a totally different rider with a totally different riding style. They're having to guess. They have to do guesswork every Friday trying to figure this out and trying to find the sweet spot and find the performance window. And Marc, he's mentioned this before, his riding style does not suit Ducati on paper. He went from a bike that had all the front grip in the world to a bike that's got all the rear grip in the world, and how Marquez's style can't translate to going fast over a lap on the Ducati. It just doesn't work on paper.
So, well, and it's the first 2 or 3 laps is what they've been described as. The first 2 or 3 laps on brand new tires, Marc can't really jive with the bike. And that's not just in qualifying, that's in practice, and that's in race trim. But then the pace comes, and the pace comes pouring out because he starts going by people.
Yeah.
But that's really the crux of what is left for him to challenge for a championship this year. He's got to get the qualifying going. He's given himself too much work to do going into Saturday and Sunday. And he's doing the work, but you can't expect to start racking up podiums every single weekend from 12th and 13th on the grid.
It's not a realistic way to do it.
It's not really sustainable.
No. And with Bagnaia and Martin being as quick as they are, you're not going to beat them from 13th on the grid very often, if ever. You're waiting for an unforced error at that point for that to be able to work.
Which he got in the sprint.
He did get in the sprint, but you can't expect that week in, week out with those two. You can't. They're too good not to. And that leaves us in, I want to get the other minor story out of the way. Well, I say minor, it's an interesting one at least. We're getting no Indian Grand Prix this year. The rumors turned out to be true. The Indian Grand Prix will not happen this year in September. It's going to be moved to 2025. There's rumblings it will be the season opener next year instead, because Qatar will, in its usual spot, will likely be moved to April, because March 2025, Ramadan, the religious festival, if you're Muslim, takes basically the entire month of March by early projections. It's looking like to the 1st to 31st of March. So Qatar, to respect their religious event, it's looking like that won't be happening in that month. So it's looking like India, then Portimao will likely lead off the 2025 season, and Kazakhstan will take its place as a result of the flooding in the area of Kazakhstan where the track is. That's why it was initially postponed in the first place. That will now take that spot on the calendar September 22nd or later on this year instead. Apparently the track is finally ready for homologation. It's just, it's had a bit of a humanitarian disaster, unfortunately, in the last few weeks, hence the move to September. But, gents, what have you made of all the silly season talk as well? Because we've had a lot of it going into this weekend as well. No one seems to be quite sure what Ducati wants to do here. Gazetta's been the first to put their head above the parapet. They think Ducati's factory team is going to take Martin instead. And where do we go from here?
Well, It depends on the elephant in the room. Whether Premac stay with Ducati or if they take the free Yamahas with the Yamaha Works contract. They save a boatload of money every year and they get to suffer. But they get a boatload of money. And Yamaha gets more data to try and develop out of the hole they are in with the M1. New aero package this weekend was a step forward for them. Still not great, but it's almost like there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel with the Yamaha. Not so much in the other part of the Japanese Cup. It depends what Premac do.
It really does seem like it's boiling down to Pramac, and whether they choose to stay with Ducati or whether they go to Yamaha. Like, the Yamaha has made a very compelling offer. Bikes for free, equal partnership, saves millions on the balance sheet per year, mutual collaboration. It's a tempting offer, given, the whole attitude of, hey, are you ever really going to win long term as a customer to Ducati? Or, can Yamaha develop their way back into contention for 2027 potentially with the new regulation change that's coming? Who knows? Very different bikes. The temptation for Pramac to basically go off sequence is going to be interesting, but that also plays up the potential controversy of what does Ducati do if Pramac bolts. Like, they've got two GP25s that have to go to somebody. Fermin Aldeguer is on a factory contract, and he's got to go somewhere for next year if that doesn't work out. Like, Pramac, from what I've been told, Ducati is basically using Pramac and Marc Marquez as bargaining tools. It's like, hey, if you stay with Ducati, you might have Marc Marquez ride for you next year. Marc Marquez, no, I'm not changing customers again. Whoops. He said that today in the press conference. Says it's a good team, high potential, doesn't want to ride for him.
I hate to interrupt the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen what I've just seen?
Have you seen what I've just seen? Are you thinking what I'm just thinking?
Yeah. Go on.
For those who are listening to this show, I mean, given the discussions we have on here quite regularly, you probably know which way we lean politically. Donald Trump guilty on all counts.
Wait, Donald Trump, the guy who was at the Coke 600?
Guilty on all counts in the New York hush money trial.
That's our show, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Oh, man, I wish I had a victory cigar right now.
Back
to the studio.
Back
to the studio.
I am higher than giraffe pussy right about now. Good
I'm
Lord.
harder than a diamond in an ice storm.
Oh boy.
I am some or other metaphor for arousal.
Oh boy.
RJ, you are what you were during the Indy 500 episode talking about Joseph Swin.
Oh boy.
Back to the Premac discussion. Well, just the general silly season. And Mark came out today and said very, very clearly that he has no intention of going to another customer, that he either wants to go to a factory team or he wants to stay at Gresini. He likes Gresini. Can you tell he likes the atmosphere in that team when he's dancing like a lunatic after he's swinging his hips like Elvis Presley after podiums.
He was dancing on the air fence after finishing a Grand Prix in third. He is loving life right now. I've never seen the man so happy to just enjoy his riding again. That is not a guy that wants to change customer teams again. He loves Gresini. That's more than obvious to me.
If he's going to leave Gresini, it's going to be because a factory cut him a check. And if it is true, what Gazetta is saying is true, that Martin has signed in red, blue this weekend, but red going forward after this weekend, he's probably just going to stay at Gresini. I think that he would probably prefer to not learn another bike, even though he's seen he is more than capable of doing so, if someone like KTM or Aprilia came knocking. But if Premac, we discussed this, was it 2 or 3 episodes ago, if Premac do leave for Yamaha, the way to please everyone here, bring Martin up to the factory, give Mark a GP25 at Gresini, and probably give Aldeguer the other 25, over at what's probably going to be VR46.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the biggest winner for all parties. You split the GP25s to the two customer teams. VR46 takes Aldeguer over DG Antonio because I think VR46 in a pinch will be loyal to Bez. There is talk that Aprilia might try and swoop in for Bez as well, so that's something that you may want to consider as well.
I wonder if they're going to be able to find him this year.
Boy, he does not like that GP23. My goodness. Like, Fabio Di Giannantonio had the quietest 5th place in Catalonia you'll ever see in your life. Didn't even see him on the hard camera all day. P5. Good for him. Honestly. Great ride. But about time another GP23 showed up this year. But yeah, it's a weird time to be in the Ducati's negotiating room. And I feel my heart goes out to Enea Bastianini at the moment, who is sounding more and more like a dead man walking, and he really hasn't done much wrong all season.
He's been fine. He's not been like... it's hard to be Bagnaia or Martin. Nobody is at the moment.
And the fact that, he lost a whole year to an incident that he had nothing to do with.
Oh, yeah.
Luca cleaned him out round of opening act last year, and it just feels like Bastianini's been on borrowed time since then. And that's a really raw deal for a rider who was on fire 2 years ago.
A great rider, a multiple race winner, a title contender in 2022. Just a really, really outstanding bike rider who is just, he's been bad luck Brian. He's been great since coming back. Okay, Catalan was a bit dodgy. He was not taking those penalties out of protest. I mean, okay, for once Freddie Spencer was right, but here we are. But overall, he's been excellent this year.
A broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah, no kidding. But it looks like Bastianini will be the one sacrificed in the grand scheme of Ducati not being able to hold on to everybody. And it looks like they might find a way, if they can help it. If Pramac goes to Yamaha, then Ducati will have the Holy Trinity all on factory bikes, and the 3 best riders in the world at the front of the field all on the same machinery. That's terrifying.
And they get their fresh rookie on current equipment as well and see what he can do, because Aldeguer's a great rider.
Yeah.
They win. As if Ducati has not done enough winning over the past couple of years, they might somehow be able to please basically everyone they're trying to in this current rider lineup, in this current rider market, going into a period where nothing is guaranteed. Look at what we saw in Formula One going from 21 to 22. Nothing is guaranteed when a big regulation shift is on the horizon. You get what you can when you can.
Absolutely. And the Holy Trinity.
Maximize these next 3 years. They could have a complete wash of titles from 22 all the way to 26.
Which would be wild, indeed. Yeah, that'll do it for our Catalan Grand Prix episode. It's a back-to-back doubleheader. Also, just for those who are unaware, this will be the last MotoGP race for a month after Mugello. The sport takes 4 weeks off after this race because of Kazakhstan's movement on the calendar. So enjoy the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello this weekend, because it'll be the last time you see these bikes for the best part of a month afterwards, before we get back on the calendar. I want to say it's the Assen TT after the Italian Grand Prix. So enjoy the bikes. Apparently Ducati's factory team are going to unveil an Azzurri blue bike this weekend. The Italian, the blue jersey in tribute for the best climber at the Giro d'Italia, for you cycling fans out there.
Right, you still have time to change your diecast pick. You still have time.
An Azzurri blue Ducati. If that happens, you are going to have to peel my 20-stone body off my goddamn bedroom ceiling if this happens. I need this. I'm at half-mast just thinking about it. I need this to happen. I told Lewis Sotheby, I need you to steal their merchandise out of the garage at some point this weekend. Lewis, I know you're listening to this. Find a way to make it happen, or else. Okay? That's not a promise. It's not a threat. It's a promise. Okay, do what you have to do. But yes, the Italian Grand Prix this weekend for MotoGP. Do check it out. One of the blue ribbon events of the year. I love Mugello. Fantastic track, fantastic atmosphere. Going to be a doozy, I reckon. Going to be a fantastic race. Really, really looking forward to that. Enjoy it. And we'll be back next week to review said race. It's the only one of the big... we've got Detroit as well. We've got IndyCar at Detroit as well. I forgot about it, just like IndyCar's marketing department forgot about it. The Detroit Grand Prix this weekend as well, over in IndyCar, as well as the Nürburgring 24 if you're into your sports cars as well. A lot of racing to still get through this weekend, as per usual. But until then... I've been Dre Harrison, they've been RJ O'Connell and Cameron Buckley, and until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara.
Later, y'all.
I need to go find a victory cigar.
I'm about to cut that laughing segment out of this podcast so motherfucking fast. Oh boy.